I described the National Space Company last summer in the July timeframe, where literally the accurate description of the company was 12 people, 2 conference room tables, and $2 billion. So we have to build this company organically, and we also have to build it through mergers and acquisitions, lots of inorganic growth. So the board initiated an activity to acquire Topme ETS, and that was the National Space Company's first acquisition.
Hey SpaceWatchers, this is Space Café Radio, your channel about trends, awesome events and interesting people in the space sector. Did you hear about NSG, the new space group in Saudi Arabia? Did you hear about NSG's geospatial services? I'm honest, I heard about NSG as we had the chance to host Martin Blanken, NSG's CEO, in our formats. In one of that Space Café Radios, Martin mentioned the geospatial services the company is about to offer. And that made me very curious. And as you could listen to the hook before, this Space Café Radio is really about to tell the story behind. And who could do that better than employee number 1, Jason Andrews? Jason is a serial entrepreneur who has played a pivotal role in the geospatial sector. We are discussing his journey from founding multiple companies to becoming a board member and division leader at the Neo Space Group. He provides deep insights into the challenges and opportunities within the global geospatial market. I'm Thorsten Greening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global. This episode is supported by NSG. Lean back and enjoy this deep dive. Jason, it's a pleasure to have you on our Space Café Radio today. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. It's a beautiful day here in Riyadh.
You're one of the people that pushed the boundaries of what we can do with space, from security to the commercial point of view. But what triggered you about Earth observation or the geospatial sector in the first instance?
I guess I'm an unreformed serial space entrepreneur and that I've started multiple companies. And as an entrepreneur, you just see opportunity and you go there. Originally, my first company, Andrews Space, was focused on building small satellites actually for the United States Army. And they had this vision of taking effectively a drone or a UAV and putting it in space. And at its time, the technology did not exist to do that. It required, I told the program manager, at least 2 miracles. One was, how do you take something that's $100 million and 1,000 kilograms and turn it into 50 kilograms and $2 million? That was miracle number 1. And miracle number 2 is, how do you launch all these things? Because this is around the time of Falcon 1 before Falcon 9 had ever flown. We set on that journey and it led to starting actually multiple companies. Andrews Space built the satellite, but there was no way to launch it. And so I ultimately launched Spaceflight, which was a space transportation company that didn't own rockets. We just launched everyone's satellites on everybody else's rockets. And then I started Black Sky, where we would take the satellites that we built for the government and operate them commercially, launching them using Spaceflight. And I guess the rest is history because Black Sky's out there today. But along the way, we launched everybody else's satellites, from Skybox to Planets to Spire to Hawkeye 360, Capella, ISI. So it's been great to see the whole ecosystem grow over the last 15 years and to be a part of that. And I guess to be a part of it again today.
With this 360 view that you have to this market, what is your assessment of the current state of the global geospatial market and what trends are driving it today?
On one hand, it's more robust than ever with the number of operators, again, maybe going back. So I started Black Sky in 2013, and at that time, you could count on one hand the total number of commercial imaging operators globally, and you could count on the other hand the number of commercial customers who would use that imagery. And today, that's proliferated to the point that there's probably 80 to 100 companies operating hundreds, if not thousands, of satellites that are looking at the planet. At the same time, the challenge back then is still the challenge today, and that is historically people don't buy pictures, they buy answers. And I think that has been the biggest challenge of the industry, is taking that data and turning it into insights that are actionable by companies, governments, and individuals to improve their business or solve their problem.
That's very interesting analysis. And I second that the challenges that you had at the beginning are pretty much the same today, just on a different scale. And now Saudi. So why do you think that the Middle East, particularly Saudi Arabia, is emerging as a key player in this geospatial sector?
I guess that's the million or billion dollar question. Taking a look at why am I a Riyadh? So I got asked in 2022 by the Public Investment Fund, which is the sovereign wealth fund of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as part of Vision 2030, which is the transformation of the Saudi economy from an oil-based economy to a tech and tourism-based economy. Out of Vision 2030, they decided to start a space company called the Saudi National Space Company. Our legal name is the National Space Company, and our trade name is the Neo Space Group. So I was asked to be on the board, given my background and experience across multiple verticals in the space industry. We set this company up, and it came out of a focus and a realization on the part of Saudi Arabia that while they're a G20 country, incredibly wealthy, the domestic space infrastructure was near the bottom of the G20 countries in ranking. So this was a focused effort and investment to change that situation. So the Neo Space Group was set up with 3 focus areas: satellite communications, Earth observation, remote sensing or geospatial, and then also PNT, position, navigation, timing, and IoT. All of those 3 areas, as we stood up the company, early on, it's always difficult and you need certain individuals. And so they said, Mr. Board Member, can you step in and help us for a period of time? So I took over the geospatial division on day one, as I was effectively employee number 1 of the geospatial division. And over the last year, we've been able to put together a strategy and move this forward. And to your question, why geospatial? Why Saudi Arabia? Geospatial is about understanding our planet in real time and for all the benefit of everybody. And if you just think about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they will be the first to admit they live in a bad neighborhood. So there's clearly national security implications for having a more robust space industry and specifically a geospatial capability. They are one of the largest consumers of geospatial data, meaning both imagery and insights on the planet. At the same time, they don't own any geospatial satellites. But the third part of this is, as part of Vision 2030, the government of Saudi Arabia is spending on the order of 150 billion US dollars each year to transform the country and do these mega projects. So geospatial can be used to both understand and optimize your country. And so geospatial, if we could just make the spending of the PIF 1% more efficient, that turns into really big dollars, like over $1 billion. So it plays a critical role to understanding the economy and transforming the nation and improving quality of life here, but also understanding and optimizing the future design of this new economy.
Before we coming to the journey of the geospatial department you're running, so the entire setup that you just mentioned in Neo Space Group, so how is it impacting government and commercial initiatives in the kingdom and maybe also beyond?
As far as before the National Space Company, there was no national champion for space. So I think if you were an international organization trying to figure out how to come and provide services or capabilities or information, there was no clear front door. So by creating the National Space Company, what the kingdom did is create a front door and a partner for everyone to work with to bring those capabilities, products, and services to the kingdom for the benefit of everybody. So commercial entities, civil entities, military. So that's really what our mission and focus is. And it's not just in geospatial, it's all in satellite communications and Internet of Things. And it's a very modern society that's being built here. So we're here as a basic infrastructure to help everybody.
Since NSG, the Neo Space Group, was launched in May 2024, so last year, how has the geospatial division evolved? And you as employee number 1, you should know all about that.
As I said, the National Space Company was really the first national champion. So phase 1 from a board governance and management standpoint was, what are key companies and capabilities that already exist in the kingdom that we might move under this new umbrella? And so we identified Tatni ETS as one of those companies. They are a provider of geospatial information services to the Saudi government. I described the National Space Company last summer in the July timeframe, where literally the accurate description of the company was 12 people, 2 conference room tables, and $2 billion. So we have to build this company organically, and we also have to build it through mergers and acquisitions, lots of inorganic growth. So the board initiated an activity to acquire Tatni ETS, and that was the National Space Company's first acquisition. And that was actually completed in March of 2024. Before the announcement of NSG publicly in May of 2024, I showed up in May of 2024. So the first thing was, okay, we just acquired this company. What do we do with it from a strategy standpoint? And what is our broader strategy? At the same time, there was an initiative from one of our ministers here, CST, Communication, Space, and Technology, with the vision that they wanted to modernize the satellite image acquisition infrastructure and process in the kingdom. And so they initiated a competition to provide a geospatial marketplace and was going to issue a permit. We wrote that proposal and were awarded that opportunity. But given the scope and breadth of the vision and the time frame for implementation, everything here is changing very fast. So how do you operate at that pace? There was really no way other than to acquire a company. So we ran a process and ultimately led to the selection of Up 42. And we've been in a process to acquire that from Airbus, their owner. We have announced the acquisition and we're currently in the regulatory phase and working towards closure here in the first part of 2025. So those were the very tactical things, but around that framework was a strategy that if you look at any industry, there's a value chain. And if you look at geospatial specifically, you have the people that build the satellites, you have the people that then launch the satellites and you operate the satellite. Then you source the data and ultimately take those pictures that we've already talked about. The problem in the industry is people predominantly don't buy pictures, they buy answers. So how do you take those pictures and turn into answers? So if we map the value chain to our strategy, we already own a downstream business in Topme ETS that we've renamed Geospatial Services that takes satellite data and converts it into answers. And they have a tremendous capability. They've built what we have termed the data factory. And from that, they output data sets. Think of it as a digital twin of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that's used by all stakeholders to support their business. We have the marketplace, which sits in the middle of the value chain, which, as we talked about when we started 10 years ago, it was 4 companies selling to 4 customers. Now it's 100 companies selling to 1,000 customers. So there's been this opportunity for a marketplace to arise as the interconnected tissue to connect satellite providers with downstream users and do it in a manner that you can aggregate demand. So it's beneficial for the upstream satellite operators. They don't have to deal with 1,000 customers. They can deal with a handful of customers. And for the providers downstream, they don't have to negotiate individual contracts with 3 different satellite operators to get the data they need. They can just go to one marketplace and buy it all in one spot. So that is the key role of the marketplace. We are investing it to deploy that marketplace in the kingdom, but also invest in their Up 42 business to grow it internationally. And then the final piece that I've talked about is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia doesn't own any geospatial satellites. So at some point on our roadmap in the future, maybe hopefully the near future, we might move into satellite acquisition and operations to support this value chain and have our own sovereign capabilities here in the kingdom.
Before we're looking into the acquisitions you just mentioned and discover a bit more what is in there, can you help us to understand what are the core objectives of NSG's geospatial division? Where you want to go with that?
Look, the National Space Company, NEO Space Group, is part of Vision 2030, which our objectives are aligned with their objectives. And those objectives there's 4 points to it. The first one is how do we make investments that ultimately lead to a stronger, diversified tech economy in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So all of the strategy, the organic growth, the non-organic growth is how do we onshore skills and capabilities for the benefit of Saudi Arabia long-term, but also to build a robust workforce and sovereign capabilities, national capabilities. But space is a part of STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, which is core to any country from an education standpoint. So not only are we here to provide national level capabilities, we're also here to inspire the next generation. We're effectively the SpaceX of Saudi Arabia and get people excited about the space industry, take that as a career path and have more opportunity while at the same time having a great job. Then the other part of what we're trying to do is create an ecosystem. Because we're funded by the PIF, it's easy to say we'll be the monopoly and we'll just do everything for everyone. And that's actually not the objective. What we're trying to do is be the cornerstone of what can become a large geospatial ecosystem here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The government is pumping $150 billion into the economy every year. So everybody has needs on information, services, knowledge, change management, change detection. So we're really here also to help enable that ecosystem. And the last piece, the fourth element is then, okay, how do you build a business that plays on the world stage, can be a global leader? So the investments we're putting into the National Space Company are really to create businesses that are ultimately down the road, 5 years, 10 years, could be on par with major aerospace companies and brands that you might know of, like Airbus and Maxar. So that gives you a sense of how it all fits together.
You just triggered a point when you mentioned Maxar or Digital Globe before. So there's also the history, and maybe you can help us a bit to understand, what did you bought? What have you taken over?
Sure. We acquired a subdivision of Tatnia called ETS, which stands for Engineering Technical Services, which is not a great name for the value that they provide. What they predominantly do is do projects around geospatial insights and services. And they acquire data sets and information from all the usual suspects, Maxar, Airbus, and then they process it. And as an example, some of the products in that business is not small. Today, that business is 400 people. And we acquired them, it was probably 250 people. It's growing very fast because we have these contracts where we're providing a digital twin of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as well as turning that into a series of geospatial products like maps, data sets, and other things in what they're doing today. So we're excited about that. Abdulaziz, he's the CEO. He runs that business for us. He's got a fantastic team. They've built this very unique capability called a data factory, which, given all of my experience around the world in geospatial, is unique in its capabilities. And we're excited about how we can use that in the short term to support the kingdom, but also potentially other customers outside the kingdom in the future.
So who's your client today? Maybe you can give us a taste of it.
Well, for Tatnia ETS specifically, they're 99% of their business is here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And I would say 90% of it is for civil and organizations in the MOD. So it's providing those foundational data sets today. If we think about the Up 42 marketplace, that is an international business that actually does no business in the kingdom today. And so it's really about onshoring a platform that we can deploy here for support of commercial, civil, and all government customers. At the same time, what they do is they provide the infrastructure that allows companies to acquire imagery and turn it into answers. I really see that personally as more of a catalyst in the industry to accelerate the generation and ultimately adoption of answers across the value chain, across the industries, and across the world.
It seems that Tatnia ETS and Up 42 are doing quite similar things. So how do you merge them together? I got the point of international business and national business, but is there an intention to merge them?
Actually, they're two very distinct parts of the value chain. So think of it as our Geospatial Services division in the company formerly known as Tatnia ETS is a large consumer of satellite imagery. The marketplace is a large provider of satellite imagery. So for us, the ETS is a downstream value-added service business, and they're one of many customers of the marketplace. So it's incredibly synergistic. You asked earlier about the strategy. If we were to own any geospatial satellites and we provided that data, obviously we would sell it through the marketplace and use it in our downstream business as well. But we're developing that capability so that we can use it across our different businesses and just sell it as a revenue opportunity.
Let's look a bit into the future. I mean, you mentioned the strategy 2030, and it's around the corner, let's face it. Looking ahead, what are the key priorities and developments you envision for NSG's geospatial division?
The management team at NSG has been here less than a year. So we're very much in that, if you think about forming, storming, norming, we're very much in the forming phase. So I think by 2030, though, we will have built robust businesses in our different focus areas, and we will have matured our products and services and normalized that data flow and be vertically integrated. So to a certain extent, we acquire a huge amount of data, but we're also generate our own data through satellites. We will distribute that data globally and locally through our marketplace. And we will have enabled a robust ecosystem of geospatial companies here in the kingdom, but at the same time with our geospatial services business, be the go-to provider of critical geospatial services for large and small commercial organizations and for the government. When they have to solve a problem, we're the ones that they think of to provide the solution.
When we look eastbound from Riyadh to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, big things also in the space sector happening there. The formation of Space 42 was for me something very significant that shook up the market. So it's a straight question to you. So what role will AI play in your division in the short-term future?
Yeah, I mean, let me tackle both of those separately, the geography piece and then the AI piece. I think we all are fully aware that the UAE has been a first mover in the Middle East in space and is admittedly a decade ahead of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia from space investments, infrastructure, and capabilities. So if you look, to your point, to the east, to UAE, does this Kingdom of Saudi Arabia look like that in the future? And I think the answer is yeah, absolutely. But I think we might be 10 years behind, but it's not going to take us 10 years to catch up. And I think that's a very important topic, is that what's unique about NSG now and in the Middle East is that across the industry, access to capital is still highly constrained. And we are the one region that has access to capital and is therefore has the opportunity to make big moves and big bets and move very quickly to create a very meaningful capability. And as we project forward beyond 2030 to the next decade, I think you will see the Middle East rise up and be one of the global players in a way that has not been true in the past. So it's an amazing time and place to be. To your point where we started, I could do anything at the moment, but I chose to be here because as a serial entrepreneur, you always have dreams and never have access to capital. And where in your lifetime would you ever have someone come to you and say, here's a couple $1 billion, don't screw it up? It was an amazing opportunity for me personally to be here and architect something very meaningful for the kingdom and now watch that grow into the future, which then I think goes to your last point about AI and geospatial specifically. And I think that is the real excitement and opportunity, is part of the reason we haven't, as an industry, geospatial industry specifically, been able to make that conversion from pictures to answers is because it's been very expensive to acquire the images because there was a handful of providers and there was more demand than there was supply. And at the same time, it was very manual, taking those pictures and turning those into answers. So we relied on highly trained experts who aren't cheap. Now we're entering a totally different paradigm where access to data is exploding. The price is dropping very fast because, if anything, we've now reached critical mass from the proliferation of satellites and sensors in low Earth orbit. And now it's about how do we turn it into answers? And to do it at scale, you have to leverage AI, which over the last 5 years has been simple machine learning algorithms around, okay, let's identify cars, planes, ships, but we're still not really categorizing that. I think we're making a lot of progress and things are moving very fast, but the next level is how do we use language models to set up workflows? So instead of buying a bunch of images and doing a bunch of processing, you say something like, go monitor the output of Rio Tinto from April 15th to April 30th. In these 3 locations, tell me the output and then make a stock trade based on that. That is where we're going, so that all that processing is now just done automatically at effectively zero cost. So that is going to really accelerate the adoption of geospatial data, and I think will be good for the industry in the long term.
Yeah, I'm missing the human in the loop here, but that's a different discussion we might have. It's time now to take out your crystal ball and listen to the wisdom that you can provide. What's the next big thing? So what other emerging technologies or trends do you believe will have the most significant impact on the geospatial industry over the next decade?
I think if the holy grail of all of this is to understand the planet in real time, and you say, how to do that? Do we have the AI to do that? Do we have the compute process? Do we have the sensors to do it? And the answer is almost. It's not cost optimized today, but it could be in the future. And then the question is just how far in the future is that? I think what you will see as we go down this path, that you talked about human in the loop. It's visible imagery has been the major demand because humans have been in the loop. That's the spectrum that we understand because we see pictures and look at it with our eyes. But if you start thinking about, well, what are the sensors you really need if it's a machine looking at the planet? I think that changes the answer quite a bit. Pictures are great during the day when there's no clouds. But if you want to operate 24/7 day and night, you're going to start thinking about thermal and radar and RF and fusing all that data together to create a holistic model of the planet and the economy and the comings and goings of industry. So I think that is where the future is, and it's going to drive a shift. The other thing that's really interesting is up to this point, the small sat revolution came about because of the power of the cell phone and the fact that we could shrink the overall size of the satellite. And everybody spent the last decade figuring out how to pack as much technology as possible into a very small size, because that was where you got to scale from a unit economic standpoint. Now, with the incoming change to launch infrastructure, where now you have within the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be vehicles like Starship that are going to be flying far more than you see small launch vehicles or even Falcon 9s. You can think different about the space segment and how you build really big satellites that can do things that we could only have dreamed about a few years ago. And you'll be able to build those big spacecraft and sensors at a different price point. So we're about to undergo a whole nother revolution. If we had the small sat revolution, we're about to go into the large sat revolution, and how that's going to change geospatial, I think we can only envision. And just to put it out there, whereas the Hubble Space Telescope probably cost $1 billion to build and $500 million to launch, what if it costs $1 million to build and $500,000 to launch? What does that future look like? And I'll let everybody ponder that maybe.
Jason Andrews, thank you very much for your time and that very insightful conversation. Thank you.
Thorsten, it's a great format and it was wonderful to be your guest, and look forward to future conversations.
And if you have further questions, reach out to us at radio@SpaceWatch.Global. If you like these or other episodes of Space Café Radio, leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. It is the currency of today. And if you want to stay on the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletters. And of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Thorsten Kriening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, your independent perspective on space.